Hello and welcome. Today I'm excited to welcome Nick Antoniades. Nick is a marketing visionary with over 2 decades of experience at the forefront of customer relationship marketing. He's built his career transforming how major brands connect with their customers with a long tenure and leading customer lifecycle marketing strategies in the D2C subscription space and previously driving remarkable results at companies like HelloFresh and the original Bed Bath & Beyond, where his personalization initiatives generated over millions in incremental revenue and I'm sure touched everyone's lives in some way with their loyalty program. I've known Nick for years, and he's always had this innate ability to see around corners in an industry that's rapidly evolving. He's been wrestling with some pretty interesting questions that are becoming critical with every brand today. How do we prepare for a world where AI agents will be making purchasing decisions for consumers? How do we build emotional connections that transcend what's become a big commoditization trap in consumer goods? And perhaps most importantly, how do we balance cutting edge tech with authentic, legit human experiences? Nick's expertise spans the entire customer journey from complex attribution challenges to the economics of customer retention, where he's consistently proven and has beaten my head over the years on this that investing in existing customers often delivers better ROI than just pure acquisition plays. He's particularly passionate about the paradox that a lot of brands face today, which is consumers are simultaneously demanding personalized experiences, but also need to be protective of their data privacy. Nick is someone who's built centers of excellence at many companies and navigated the practical challenges of implementing unified customer data platforms and bring strategic boots on the ground experience. We'll dive into his insights on preparing for the future of commerce while building brands with real staying power in what's become an increasingly automated world. Nick, welcome. Would you like to tell ladies and gentlemen a bit more about yourself and what you're seeing as an operator in digital commerce today?
Yeah. Hey, team. Always good to see you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to share my insights on where the world is headed these days on e-commerce. So I think you've done me justice on my background. I spent a couple of decades in the D2C space, all the way from the early days of internet, and I've spanned a lot of D2C sectors from fashion, vitamins, home goods, food, and so on. And what I've seen is things change, but the challenges of building relationships with the customers and retaining them generally tend to be the same. The problem changes, but the root of it remains the same. How do I build an emotional connection with the customer without being salesy to them?
It's tough. And, look, you had shared with me in preparing for our talk today. Look, probably most of what we're going to talk about today is going to be outdated in like 10 minutes just because it's just the inherent nature of just the generative AI, evolution. And I just think that in and of itself is kind of wild. But I'd like if we could to maybe just start at, some bedrock principles of this. Like, you talk about the subconscious commerce and AI driven customer expectations. Talk a little bit about the life cycle of that from the trend acceleration to the future scenarios, and then how that's really shifting into ultimately, agent to agent communication.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes before anything we say becomes outdated. I was actually looking at a presentation that I did in February, and it was completely outdated last month in May 2025. So the speed by which this evolution is happening is faster than all the previous revolutions we've had. And that is inevitable. And what that does is it creates interesting questions. Leaving aside beyond e-commerce, let's just stay within e-commerce. How does it change e-commerce? So now we can be as speculative as we want. What I've seen, and this is my hypothesis, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is over the years, go back as far as you want, has been happening is technology takes elements of the shopping pattern and automates them, changes them, or completely removes them. You and I are old heads, right? In our younger days, we used to go to malls and hang around malls, right? Internet comes along. No more need to go to the malls for a lot of those things. Then you had product recommendations. You don't have to flip through PDP after PDP or category page after you find the product you want on page 17 of the category. Now you have product recommendations that give you what you want, and it keeps evolving. Where I think will happen is that it will take us to a point where, for a lot of our purchases, it will just end up being agents talking to agents, talking possibly to other agents, until it eventually gets to the consumer who will only have to confirm the purchase. And I don't know, I've written you that particular example, which I think is probably one of the very first ones that we're going to see is, you're going to be at home doing whatever, and your AI agent or assistant or whatever you want to call them will kick in, and it will tell you, you know what, I've been reading the sensor on the washing machine and the dryer and your historical purchases. It's time to get new t-shirts. It's been a few years, they're old, they're not good. And we have our preferred vendors, of course, that have the t-shirts your style, the colors you want. Shall I confirm the purchase? Do you want 6 or 8? And all we'll end up doing is kind of go, yes. And probably at some point, there's going to be legal requirements to do double confirmation. It says, are you sure? Yes.
Yeah.
But that's where we're heading for a lot of our basics and a lot of the things that will become non-thinking stuff or zero effort parts. It will just be a verification. And that is it. Now, there is place for exploratory shopping, for unexpected shopping, but we'll get to that later. But for a lot of these things, shopping may actually become nothing more than a quick interaction.
I think you're right. I think there's going to be gradations of that, though. I was talking with a dear friend on another conversation, Christopher Reiter, who's got an omni-channel digital agency. And Christopher years ago helped reimagine the Oakley stores, and so he's got and he's worked with Estee Lauder and some very, very, very special brands. And his point of view on what you're saying, and I tend to agree with him, is that yes, I think for purposes of digital commerce, agentic commerce, which is going to become a thing. You're seeing, by the way, in the new iteration of, I don't know whether you saw this CarPlay, Apple CarPlay, there's talk about that becoming shoppable now. Like you're going to have they're leaving space in that for that to become shoppable. And I'm going, this is brilliant. Like this is really smart. You're at a stoplight and there's to your point, there's going to have to be, legal opt-ins and, you can't, drive, off a cliff and, all these things. But somebody will figure this stuff out. Point is that you're not going to do discovery within, for instance, CarPlay, Claude. My dryer is going to tell me I've got an LG dryer, I think downstairs. It's going to tell me, hey, you know what, your t-shirts, it's time for new ones. I think for some very core basic things like that, it's going to be amazing. But, I'm just the eternal optimist, as I know you are. And I just believe that all of this sort of commoditization, where it's accelerating commoditized purchases, I think what it does is it leaves a pretty significant door open for experiential stuff. And I think that, and I'm one of these people that's, I'm digital, but it's omni, because at the end of the day, 75% of all transactions are still done in a store, a physical, living, breathing store. And my point with sharing my friend from Christopher, what Chrissy had told me was, he said, listen, you know what, sell your white t-shirts, to your t-shirt analogy, sell your white t-shirts online. But your seasonal, your cerulean blue, your moss green, or whatever your sort of flavors of the month are, those are going to go in your stores. And that's going to be a reason you're going to train your customer. And she is going to understand that, if I want the cool stuff, the trending stuff, I got to get myself into a physical store and do it that way. Honestly, I think with a lot of where, generative AI is taking us, I think it's closing some doors, but I think it's opening a whole lot of new ones too, Nick.
You're absolutely Correct. It will. And it's almost like it's going to fulfill its own destiny because the more it becomes impersonal and automated, the more we will start valuing those interactions even more. So we'll be craving the opportunity to go and explore and find something. We might do it less than before, but they will become a lot more important. And that will be the opportunity for the brands and the retailers to say, how are you going to be experiential? Because you will see them less, but they will be hungrier for that interaction.
You had a front row seat for this at Bed Bath, where, and I don't know this timetable where you were there and when they were going through their final cycles. They pivoted away pretty aggressively from national brands and were leaning very, very hard into private label. And talk, if you could, a little about, and by the way, they're on record, when they were sort of in their last days in their first generation and, pre where they are now, but they were on record of saying one of the things that we didn't get right was we were focused, we took some advice and we leaned into some private label categories that the consumers didn't react to it, and they didn't want commoditized stuff. They wanted the national brands because there was a level of trust there and a level of experience there, quite honestly, that spanned generations. I just wonder, just talk a little about that.
Yeah. And, hindsight's 2020, right? But
Yes, it is.
what eventually was proven was that a big part of what made Bed Bath was actually that experiential treasure hunting of going to the store and figuring out which one of the 25 different pots you want to get, or the 10 different can openers, which are almost all identical. But there was a big element of that. And yes, there are repercussions to that, right? Inventory, locked in inventory, massive amounts of inventory that you need to maintain and so on. Layouts of the store that you had to optimize to make sure people could find things easily. But then that was the actual experiential component of Bed Bath & Beyond. And unfortunately, once that was taken away and the SKU count shrunk, that treasure hunting and exploration was gone. And I don't know whether that was the reason or it just expedited the demise, but it definitely did not help the brand. But again,
Yeah.
it's hindsight 2020. It's good for us to be saying, to be looking back. Who knows what decisions we would have made if we were right at the front row making those decisions.
But look, they created an emotional, it was palpable, right? We're in New York Metro here. You saw on the cover of like the Post and whatever, you had people like, clutching onto their coupons, like, for dear life. Like, no, I still want to use these. And like, they were just so passionate about the place and about the experience. And look, I hope they get it back to that. I really do. Because it's just one of these great like nameplates, awesome brand. And I do hope that they eventually get back to some version of where they were at that point. But, they created an emotional connection that transcended a P&L that was just way bigger than just some commoditized widgets. I mean, people love that place.
Yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely correct. And, you could argue that a lot of those components of categories of Bed Bath & Beyond were commodities. I need a basic pan. I need a basic can
I mean,
opener.
like
I
you
need,
can't, right? I mean, like, okay, I understand there's a lot of nuance. I was in this industry. I know there's a lot of different levels of cans. I got it. But people got so like passionate about it. And what was interesting is that you had all of these pundits running around the industry. You know who they are, saying, okay, Bed Bath did $1 in business. Okay. Target was going to get 20 cents. Amazon was going to get 30 cents. Costco was going to get up. And guess what? None of that was true. Why? Because if you don't understand these brands and the connection to like human beings, you're away from your screens, you're away from your PowerPoints. If you really understood what that phenomenon was that it was experiential. You went there and you didn't need anything. You didn't need the towels. Yeah, you have a whole closet. Everybody's got a closet full of towels. You didn't need more, but you went there because you wanted to buy it. So if you didn't buy towels from them, okay, conventional wisdom. There's $1 worth of towels business being done. I'm going to go buy it somewhere. No, you're not. You're just not going to buy those towels. And like, I think when you miss that touch and you don't have that feel for, the consumer, you start sort of making decisions that, aren't necessarily the best for the business.
Yeah, if you're looking at it fully on the ROI and fully on the P&L, and how do you maximize that P&L? And, you know, you keep forgetting that there is a big underlying question, which is why is this company, retailer or D2C, in existence? Meaning, what does it offer to the consumer that they cannot get from buying the same or similar product somewhere else, which in today's world is prevalent. There are hundreds of ways to buy the same product or similar. So why from a particular place? What's the advantage or what's the value add that they bring? And that is becoming, it has always been important, but I think it's becoming even more so now. And, it sometimes still gets forgotten. There is a reason why people shop from a specific place. They are not going there to buy a pot, a can opener, an iPhone.
It was
That
recreation. Like, honestly, it was like
Yeah,
recreational commerce. I mean, it's really, and I don't know whether they ever called it that. I wasn't inside like you, but it kind of was that. Like, well, yeah, what's for them? We're linen things. I mean, how many
yeah,
trips on linen things we came home with? I mean, we still have, and they're out of business how many years now? We still have, like, I still find like bags like in our LNT. It was all over the place, but it was recreational almost.
in a way, yeah. I wouldn't call it recreational because recreational implies a specific type of experience. It was experiential in some shape or
Experiential, much
form.
better. Yes.
And that's what we seem to forget that is crucial. It's not about the growth, the top line, the bottom line. Obviously, they are. You need those. But there has to be something that defines the company even more. And, when we're doing the notes before, you asked me like a couple of big brands. The quintessential example of the brand that lives up to a name that goes way beyond P&L is Patagonia. And you cannot run Patagonia as like a straight P&L. It is a very, very different brand with the strong value proposition that practically defines what that company is.
What you're talking about are brands with a soul, really. And if you identify with that, and look, by the way, some people won't, right? Like, they just won't. There's going to be folks out there that don't like what they're selling from all kinds of different perspectives, but that's okay. They have enough folks that really are like bought in. By the way, you're getting to sort of another topic that I'm very, very passionate about, which is brands that are winning today. I'm not going to call anybody out, but brands that are winning today, the management teams all the way down through the organization, they have a very, very well defined point of view about the categories they're in, the retailers that sell their product, and most crucially, the customers that are paying the very, very hard earned money for these products. The management teams and the folks that are running these businesses that are winning today have an incredibly strong, well articulated point of view about who they're serving as a brand, what the brand means, what does their soul mean? Like, how are they sort of bringing themselves to market? Because to your point, you want to buy commoditized anything. I mean, you have your choice, Temu, Shein, wherever. Stuff's all over the place. But if you are positioning yourself as a legitimate bona fide brand, the guys that are winning are really, really thoughtful about what they're bringing to market, and then also bringing legitimate innovation into the marketplace. And I'm not seeing a lot of them out there, but the ones that are actually doing well, the street, for the public companies, the street is rewarding them in like spades. Like, it's unbelievable. And again, I don't want to call anybody out, but there's a handful of companies out there in consumer goods space that are being really, really thoughtful. And like, I mean, Nick, the market caps are just like, whoa. And this is in the midst of like, the tariffs. By the way, they have the same tariffs that their competition has, but somehow brands that are like really, really thoughtful, they're moving past that, and it just becomes part of a business cycle.
Yeah, it's this is not my comment, so it's somebody else's, but it's I really liked it because they said retail is not dead. Boring retail is dead. And when retail becomes experiential, and that's then you know that you've got a winner. When a CPG defines its products beyond just the use of that product, but almost like as a value to the consumer, then you know that their chances of success are much, much higher.
True. Want to just switch lanes for a minute and talk about, the convergence of content and commerce. SEO is really becoming a very different animal than it was 12 months ago, 6 months ago. I mean, you've got Google, I think, first of all, Google trying to get rid of cookies. They've been trying for 2 years plus now to get rid of cookies. And they finally recently
I
said,
think it's
no,
longer than that, isn't it?
we can't get rid of them. Oh, that's a whole nother thing. But like the interesting part is that, from just Google's perspective, how you're needing, if you're a brand to, run SEO today, you're obviously, Google is not immune at all. In fact, they're leading, in some ways with what they call AIO or AI overview, which is the Gemini, sort of infusion into the search experience. You're having as a brand to SEO into that now. And then you're also, so I see them driving a lot of results into that, obviously. And that's going to become a whole monetization conversation with how that works. But they're driving obviously results into that. And another one I'm curious your thoughts on is a lot of results are going into Reddit. So they're driving a lot of sort of organic search results into subreddits. And they're sort of saying, you know what? Reddit now, there's obviously a lot of noise in Reddit, but there's so much legitimate consumer, like organic first party sort of like stuff in there that they're just sort of leaning on that. And I'm just curious your thoughts on how brands sort of going to have to navigate through all that.
Like we started with, whatever we say is going to be outdated, but there is a couple of things that are popping up, right?
Yeah.
So
We should hold the
you're,
newspaper up to show the date, by the way.
yeah, exactly. Date stamp
Yeah.
the discussion. So we know it's like, hey, you know what? It was back in June 2025. You can't blame me for that.
Yeah.
So there is another aspect to it, and I'll get back to your point. Now you have to do SEO not for the search engine, but for the agentic agent or the AI agent that will read the site. So we went from machine learning to AI on the sorting side. So you have to build your SEO that way. And then you have back to that value proposition we're talking about, where you have a positioning. How is that positioning translating into content? You have to speak to your value, not just the product. Oh, it's such a wonderful product. That doesn't say anything. It goes beyond about how content is generated about what you stand for and who you are. And it's not just coming from you. It has to come from the actual consumers themselves.
Yeah. And this is the Reddit, right? Like this is where we're kind of I'm going
Yeah.
with talk about Reddit, because I think Google is kind of recognizing, look, this has become a treasure trove for like legitimate arm's length from brands. I've seen this. Brands have tried for a while, just sort of inorganically force like, hey, this is our official Reddit, our official subreddit. People don't respond to it. One of the ones who's doing awesome job at this, and I don't know anybody inside the organization, but Lululemon. I look at that subreddit quite a bit, and man, I'll tell you, there are such phenomenal brand ambassadors and whatever, and it's really easy to tell if somebody's in there like shilling, because the community just boom, just swats it down like instantly. They just totally kill it. So, again, by the way, they're in a mega commoditized space, and yet they're still seeming to hang in there. And, they've got some challenges, but you know what? They have such an incredibly, incredibly loyal and rabid fan base. you can't buy it, you can't fake it, you can't sort of influencer that just is. And it's very difficult. I want to get to attribution because I know it's near and dear to your heart. I wouldn't have the slightest clue on how to do attribution on something like that.
So, by the way, you're right. But there is one other thing that is at the end, almost like a dangerous footnote, which is you can easily build it. It has to be created. You have to have the loyal fan base to create it, but you can easily damage it.
Yes.
A couple of bad decisions, and suddenly all those loyal customers would be very, very hostile to you. You have to align with who you are, and you have to live and breathe that value. What I was saying before is your value proposition has to be front and center. It doesn't override the P&L, but it has to be sitting next to it. Because if the P&L overrides the value proposition, bad things tend to happen. So how do you attribute this?
That's brilliant, by the way. That's brilliant.
So how do you
I
attribute
have a few
something like
CFO
this?
friends who would, maybe disagree. But at the end of the day, look, somebody very
Every finance person disagrees with me.
no, it's true, by the way. When you have a hallowed thing like a brand that people actually love and cherish and sort of, pass down the generations, you can screw it up very, very easily. And it doesn't take much, and it's really hard to unwind.
Yeah. So let's move on. You wanted to discuss more on the attribution side, right?
I would love to. I would love to just hear your thoughts on where that's going, because guess what? It's tough stuff. Real on a lot of levels. It's really tough stuff today.
Yeah. Look, we have to move beyond the last click and the linear attribution and the exponentially decay distribution and whatever other negative binomial and so on and so forth. We the consumers are affected by things very differently than a few years ago. It's no longer, well, you saw an ad on Facebook and then you did a search and then you click on an email and then you bought. Great, now we have 3 channels. What do we do with them? No, now it's the original brand marketing. Now is becoming the halo effect of all the social media and the exposures that you're having, and how you're going to measure that. And, I don't know about any models, and I'm still struggling with
By
it.
the way, can you some of the stuff even measure it?
Good question. I'm by nature analytical. So my default position is we have to figure out a way to measure it because we need to know how important and big it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it is not going to be easy. Sure, there are directional measures that we have. Your retention metrics and your best customers. How many posts do they have? How many referrals have they given you? Sure, those are indirect measures of the effectiveness of those social posts or that social halo, but it's nowhere near in capturing the full impact. And you can't even do a traditional incrementality analysis to carve out a portion of the people and say, don't expose them to it. So it is very hard. We know that it has to go beyond the traditional media laundry list or the journey that eventually led you to the site. And I have a pet peeve there. So how do you actually get that? And I still struggle. You have to have a solid presence, for sure. There is no doubt about it.
When you say solid presence, you mean basically full funnel, upper, mid, that's where you're going with that?
Yeah, but your top funnel has to go beyond, yes, I'm going to buy my Super Bowl ads and I'm going to do this. Your top funnel has to include your non-sponsored, non-paid, non-employees social posts, the organic community.
Basically, earned media is where you're going with this?
I'm sorry?
Earned media, in other words?
In a way, yes. Your free exposure and impressions that you get from people that really love you as a brand. And that's part of the top funnel. And even then, there is also, as interactions become more complex on the site, You also have another interesting type of attribution, which is internal attribution. Great, you managed to get them engaged. How did you get them to convert? Is it the product recommendation? Is it the ability to buy the same products that you bought before so you can find them? Is it the content on the products that led you directly there? Or is it just the traditional search and exploration that used to be the most important thing even a few years ago and sounds like it was decades ago? So yeah, you have to figure out your internal attribution because that defines how your website evolves and improves. And then back to the traditional external
By
attribution,
the way,
meaning what?
it's not just website, right? It's all your other channels too. So you're learning on a first party side, in some cases zero party on your own site. You're saying, I'm assuming you're saying, go blow that into your various channels and marketplaces too, whatever learnings you get there.
Yeah, your TikTok shop, your marketplaces, your everything else. Yeah, it has to reflect the way that your best customers or any customer shops with you. If they're coming to you because they want to buy the thing that they've seen everybody talk about, make sure that they can do that easily. If they're coming to buy the same things that they love to see all the time, make sure they can do that. But you have to understand their own journey. And that's when a lot of machine learning models on customer journey come into play that can do that. Moving to the external attribution, I try to stay up to date with it. I try to keep up on it. I don't think, at least I haven't found a good solution yet that captures that need to move beyond the traditional channels. We're still working with those channels. They're still crucial. They're still important. But there are these entire new dimensions, for lack of a better word, that we have no idea how to value and grow and develop. And
My
they're a
rad,
crucial part of
right?
it.
How do you, and it really kind of, this is where I'm really curious your thoughts. You go and like learn about a brand, and God knows I've done it. Like learn about brands I've never really considered before, and get deep into subreddits and just you go on these fishing expeditions at 4 o'clock in the morning, you can't sleep, and you're just doing whatever. How do you attribute something like that? I don't. I wouldn't even know how to begin that, and I am a Neanderthal as it comes to analytics as compared to you. I mean, so you're the king of this stuff. I wouldn't have any idea how to go start that.
You don't yet. We don't have that knowledge yet. We can get better and better at figuring out the exposure of different people and eventually get there. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think we need to learn, and now that I'm talking more about it, something that I thought is we need to learn from industries that have very long life cycles and how they build themselves up. Cars, you're not just going to buy a car. Oh, I need a new car. Yeah, sure. Let me carve out half an hour this afternoon and I'll buy one.
Good luck with that.
They've been figuring this long conversion journey for a while. So that probably might be sectors where we need to dig more in and learn from them on how they're managing it.
That's fascinating, by the way. That's interesting. So basically, you're saying you've got these very very long decision cycles. Clearly, there's industries that are familiar with this. And look, I'm sure you're going to come across some of the people in there. They just have like these big dumb Death Star budgets, and like you know what, they just throw money
Yes.
wherever they throw it, and it works, right? Because the product, at the end of the day, you don't really have to explain a BMW or Mercedes Benz to most people. Like they're aware.
I was thinking exactly the same example. Yes.
That's frightening, by the way. But yeah, no, I get it. But look, you've got this point of view on. I think I've heard you say this over the years at events and stuff. Like whatever industry that you're in, the industry up, down, and sideways. You're basically saying, look, I know my customer, I know my retailer, I know my whatever. I'm going to make a decision based on like experience. I've done this once or twice before. This isn't theoretical to me. This isn't theory or a white paper to me. Like I've actually been an operator and a practitioner at this before, not these people that sort of pretend. I'm going to make a decision, right? And guess what? I'm going to make some wrong ones, but I'm going to make decisions. And then like they're well-educated decisions. They're not just, crazy. But then I know are a big fan of making a decision and then building like a measurement framework around that. I think that's like super smart.
You cannot throw money without having a way to measure, even if it's triangulation on the
Yes.
effectiveness of that money.
Yes.
And maybe BMW saying, don't worry, we do the branding, we do the BMW, we do the product, we're good. And maybe they do, and maybe they are. But for companies without that kind of a budget, and even today, with such a proliferation of channels, you have to think twice because you can't just spend on every channel a lot of money. You just can't. There's not enough budget. So how do you then invest in a channel? And I use the term channel loosely because it could be anything from brand exposure, it could be site evaluation, or an entire channel shopping, a marketplace, and so on. How do you measure its effectiveness? There are traditional tools you can bring into play, pre and post. Wherever you can do a longitudinal incrementality, you have to. You can carve out a small group and leave them out of that experience. Always do that and try to measure effectiveness. But you have to be willing to wait. You spend a lot, or you develop those good products that develop the Lululemon or any other brand, that subreddit kind of community. You're not going to measure it over a week and saying, here's the incrementality of that Reddit, or here's the relative traffic and conversion that it drove. You have to measure it over months
And
in
you
order to
can't
get a
be,
sense
I'm
of it.
inferring what you're saying. You can't be the kitten with the ball of string and say, all right, today I want to do this. Next week I want to do this because it didn't work a week ago. So I want to go on a completely different, totally different strategy. Because something appeared in my news feed and I want to go stop what I'm doing and go do that now. Like your point is that you've seen this once or twice before. You've got a point of view on it. And on a very, very educated basis, like, hey, this should work. I'm going to try this. And we're going to let it breathe for a little while before we, decide that, we cut bait on it.
Yeah. And there are two mega foundations that you have to always take into account. One is what we talked about, the value of the brand. You're going to invest, it has to reflect what the brand stands for, whether it's a D2C or a CPG. The other flip side would be it has to make sense to the customers, to your retained, tenured customers, the ones that really love you. And that's when you need where analytics come into play, where market research on focus group come into play. Any company has a core of the really dedicated people that love the brand for whatever reason.
Evangelists, fanatics,
Evangelists,
whatever you want
fanatics,
to
the
call
people
them.
that have been shopping with you for the last 20 years or since day one that you've been around, and they love you for it. Why? What is that emotional connection they have? Even if it's something as basic as it's convenient, it's the things that I like, it's the things that fit me best. I enjoy it. It's my
Passion, hobby, interest, whatever.
it keeps me happy. It's an experience, and I go there and I always feel happy, and so on. Those two have to make sense in what you're about to embark on. You want to build a marketplace. Make sure that marketplace reflects your values, and make sure that it's designed for the kinds of people that are similar to your best customers, because those are the ones that you want to get more of. Your one-offs, sure, every company has them, but they're not the 80-20 rule, right? There is a small group of customers, and I've seen it time and time again, that drive a lot of the margin. And they're more concentrated than we like to think.
They are, by the way. They're very, very concentrated. And to your point about these hardcore, like real, like brand evangelists, they're not always who the brands want them to be. And as it turns out, I'm not going to throw names around, but I've had the privilege of working with some pretty awesome brands. It happens more frequently than some people might want to realize. The brand folks' view of their customer is a little bit different, I'll say, than the reality of it. And, you have a lot of brand folks out there that just really want some of this stuff to be true. That their average customer is like 25 years old, that
Fashion forward,
all that.
lives in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the cool parts of the city, and like they've founded and exited like 4 startups, and like whatever, and like isn't this? Yeah, maybe a couple, but there's only a handful of these people that roaming the earth anyway, relatively speaking. This isn't your real bread and butter person. It's just not. And then when they kind of like, all right, well, okay, it's a little different. Once they're able to see that though, and they can go, okay, this is the reality. Once you can sort of warm them up to that, then you can sort of like temper these messages and balance this going market strategies. But that comes from like a lot of just leadership and incremental conversations. You can't drop some of these things on your management team and your leadership team that says, you know what, you're dead wrong. It's just not going to work that way. You have to have like these progressive wins. And, you talk about fluidity and, migration and this and that in terms of like leadership. Like you can't just be inflexible and just say, this is the way. You have to sort of be able to pivot into some of this stuff.
You do. And you don't necessarily have everyone on board.
No.
It's better to have that fashion aficionado, 25-year-old, slender, single New Yorker, when in reality, your best customer is a 40-year-old suburban mom. Guess what? They probably have high disposable income.
And they do, by the way. And there's a lot of them. Like, there's a lot of that.
Exactly. But that has to come from a leadership. And there has to be a flexibility. But where you have to begin your stand in a way is, what is this brand stand for? Not so much who do we serve, but why do we serve anyone? What's the advantage to the consumer or the value add that we bring? Once you determine that, what do I stand for beyond the products that I sell or the real estate that I have, is what do I truly offer as a value? The treasure hunting of Bed Bath and Beyond, the Patagonia's kind of environmental stance, Ben & Jerry's, obviously, agree or disagree, you can't deny that the strength of their
they have a point of view. Guess what? Ben & Jerry's knows their customer, no pun intended, ice cold. They know exactly who their person is. And I'll tell you, they have done, when Ben & Jerry were still running it, when they sold, now, and they're in a new cycle again, they know exactly who their person is. And they have never wavered from that. And you can agree or disagree with it. You like it? Great. Go buy more ice cream. You don't, go buy, I don't know, Haagen-Dazs or Breyers or what have you. But they are so dialed in. They have a soul. You can not like it or love it or whatever. No, by the way, very few people are like neutral on a brand like Ben & Jerry's. And I think at the end of the day, that's probably, it works so well for them because they know exactly who their core person is, and they know who it isn't. And they're totally bought into doing their thing the way they do it. And they've got now decades of success doing it. And I'm sure, by the way, they've probably had consultants come in and tell them, you're leaving all this market share on the table. You talk about 80-20. Another 80-20 I really want to get into with you is 80% of the people don't want their data collected, probably more than that, by the way. They don't want their data collected, but like that same amount of people all want like these incredibly personalized experiences. So it's like, how do you think of that? And how do you sort of be a practitioner in today and beyond with that?
Yeah, no, it's probably one of my most favorite research when I see it so many times. It's like 80% of people do not collect my data, do not use my data, do not house my data, do not sell my data, do not do anything with my data of any kind. And you've got another 80%, probably almost the same one, or 80 or 90, who's saying, I expect you to personalize my experience. I expect you to know who I am. I expect you to cater to my specific needs and recognize me and acknowledge what a good customer I am. How am I supposed to do that? To do those two things at the same time?
By the way, that's not the problem. That's your problem.
Exactly. That's our problem. And the answer is, what I found is I've got a shameless plug. I've got a couple of articles already on customer data that it's on my LinkedIn profile.
We'll link in the article. We'll link to them.
And what I always thought of customer data, it's almost like, call it an unwritten agreement where the customer, you convince the customer to share some of his data and you commit yourself to safeguard it, obviously. Use it in a way to improve their own experiences. And that's it. And the more open you are about it. And I'm a proponent of loyalty programs. I like loyalty programs because it's an easy way.
You're one of the godfathers, by the way. You're one of the godfathers of loyalty in this industry.
Yes, I'm that old. Thank you for reminding me. But it is an easy way to saying, I will improve experiences. I will recognize you, reward you, and monetarily and otherwise, if you allow me to collect and use your data. And there is a need to be open about it, to communicate clearly what you will and will not do with the data. And be willing to basically offer something to customers because you're asking them to give you something valuable, their data. So that's where I think it's how you walk that fine line between convincing them to share it and use it in a responsible way.
You know, in prior lives, I would go in, a lot of cycles with our legal teams who, look, they have a job to do and they're trying to protect the company, protect consumer data and this and that. And 1,000%, I'm completely in supportive of that. But at the same time, there's got to be, to your point, I think sort of a dialogue, right, between, you're a big proponent of this. You've got an incredible responsibility as a brand to invest in data security because it's one of these things. There are so many things that you and I, do on a day-to-day basis that are not sexy, can be perceived as, a little boring. They're never going to really show up in a board deck unless there's a problem, right? They're not going to
Yes.
be, topic of a QBR unless there's a problem. But you got to do them, right? Like you have to really be aggressive in investing in data security and really just safeguarding all this stuff because A, it's the right thing to do, but B, if you've done it properly, you can confidently go to your legal team to say, listen, I need to edit my language a little bit on these privacy opt-ins and check-ins because at the end of the day, we're doing exactly what you're saying. The intent with real, like good marketers, the intent is to create a personalized sort of experience, but you do need some data on the other side of that. But what you're saying is, you really have to strike that balance between security, privacy, legal, and then keeping the customer sort of very, very well aware. Look, we're going to collect these 3 pieces of information, but we're doing it because we don't want to show you blue when all you're interested in is green. We just basically want to save your time.
You're right. So I will entertain with you something that you and I have done way too much, which is there is this big swath of our lives that is, you said it may be considered boring. No, it is boring. It is extremely boring. Data collection, data hygiene, data security, data enhancement, data enablement, data transfers between systems and audits between systems and all of that. It is boring. It is menial. But there is this need to take customer data, use it to improve their experiences that will generate more data that would then use it again to improve the experiences even further and kind of have that ever-feeding cycle. But in order to have that cycle, you have to have the data properly captured, properly secured with the right legal approvals and everything, all the verbiage in the right place, housed properly, cleaned, enhanced, utilized, and enabled in the right channels, the right deployment channels, whether it's an ESP, whether it's the website, whether it's anywhere else, in order for the marketeers to make better experiences. And then you improve that, and then you get hopefully more data from the customers and so on. But it is not the most glamorous part of what we do. But it's to me, it's one of the most valuable ones and the most important one.
Yeah, I
What do I
mean,
collect? What do I
yeah,
collect from the customers? I don't need a lot of these things. So why are they there? But I do need some critical parts that will
yes.
help me understand who they are and why they like my brand, or how I make them like my brand.
You know, you are one of the, I think, biggest voices in the industry. CAC only goes one way up, right? Like it's amazing. It never goes down. You're one of the biggest voices in the industry, I think, Nick, of saying, look, you have all these customers. They're sitting there. It's tremendously less expensive to sell him or her another thing that they maybe already bought, or also sell into adjacencies that they might also be interested in. If they bought a pan, sell them a set of knives because they're going to have to chop stuff to put in the pan to cook it. Right. Talk a little bit. I think I just wanted to, land the plane in our whole conversation about your journey with that and evangelizing that, throughout, a variety of companies and where you've had some hits and misses with it.
Yeah, I am a very big proponent of retention. Every company has different tiers of customers that vary depending on the industry, the sector, and so on. But almost every company has some customers that are tier one, top tier, whatever you want to call it. They've been with the company for a long time. They devote a big part of their wallet in that sector with you. They appreciate the brand. They're your emissaries. They post about you. They are the strongest relationship with you have. And keeping them is not as easy as you think. They need to be recognized. They need to be rewarded, whether it's anniversaries, whether it's promotions, whether it's thresholds, you spend X in the last year, and so on and so forth. Those are crucial investments that require, like I said before, longitudinal incrementality. Saying, look, I gave 90% of my top customers this offer and I kept 10% off. 3 months later, I lost a lot of margin from that 10% that didn't make that extra visit, or all is gone. And that has been the constant in so many different sectors that I've been to. Your top customers expect you to recognize them and expect to hear from you and expect you to tell them that you know who they are
Yeah.
and that you're a good spender. Flip the lens now. Let's look at the new customer. You manage to spend a CAC, an ever increasing CAC, on channels that are continuously increasing in size and complexity, or number or
And
counts,
competition within those
and
channels.
competition, right? And you manage to get a customer. Depending on your sector, depending on industries and so on, you're going to have a lot of them that will not stay, not for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, depending on what industry you're in. Some people try you. They like your advertising. They like the ad that you saw. They tried it, didn't like it. Some did, but eventually fall off and so on. It takes several new customers to actually replace a top tier one. So
How
when we're
many?
saying, oh,
How
here's
many? Roughly how many?
varies. It varies. It could be anywhere from 2 to over 10.
10
10 new customers to get a loyal one. Yes, in some
times
in
the
some
cost of
areas.
whatever that CAC is, times like up to 10.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at a ROAS and you're focusing on the transaction and you get your ROAS of 3, which is the rule of thumb, and you're good. Okay, fine. You don't have to worry about loyalty. You're willing to spend again the same amount to get another 3 ROAS next time, but you're being very transactional. If
And
you're
that pool is
losing,
finite. That pool you're fishing in right there, that pool is finite.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
There's so many people. It can be big, but it is finite. It's not just endless.
right. that smaller pool of really good customers that are generating the majority of your margin, every time somebody falls off from there, you don't have another one ready to jump in. You have to go through you have to kiss a lot of frogs to get another prince and put it into that pot. Forgive the analogy there. But it's not easy to find a top customer and nurture them to become one. I've used lookalike models based on top customers,
It's not,
and they can't.
you can't replicate them. They're out there, but like it's years of nurturing.
Exactly. You can find the right type of individual, but they have to go through the experiences and nurturing that you provide, and it's not a guarantee. So if you're doing ROAS, stay with ROAS, you're good. But if you're thinking of how do I keep that pool, that universe of top customers growing so that they continue to generate content, that they continue to buy, throwing more people into the pool is not enough. You have to say, bring them in, but you have to nurture them. And you have to value them and you have to communicate with them, but you cannot just be transactional.
Very true. Well, on that, my friend, I think it's a fantastic place to land. I'm so grateful for having caught up with you, Nick. It's always a pleasure. It's a blast. I really appreciate it.
Same. Always good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
You too.